have to have all my devices so that I feel safe, okay? I would like to say about Dr. Bernander's and Dr. Elfgren's presentation that the review panel was mostly made up of people that Nalcor paid. In fact, Nalcor paid all of them as far as we know. I'd just like to let you know that all of this work that Dr. Bernander and Stig, Lennart Elfgren have done for Grand River Keeper and for Muskrat Falls Coalition has all been done for free. And I'd also like to tell you that I mentioned on a trip on the North Spur to Gilbert Bennett that, you know, he continued to say that the North Spur is safe, and that I said, but Gilbert, we have documentation that's telling us different, that is explaining that there are new ways to study. And Dr. Bernander says you haven't used the newest methods. And he said, you know, our scientists have done the work. And I said, but your scientists are biased because they've been paid by you. Why would they say something different when they know they'll probably never get another job from you? And he said, well, Bernander is biased too. So I just want to point out that Dr. Bernander's biases, as far as it goes for our thoughts, is that he did the work because he's worried, because we're worried about what will happen on the North Spur. So I have to pull up this document here real quick. No, I don't need to. I can see it up here, sure. So I couldn't come up with a whole lot of beautiful pictures, and I didn't need to because Denise had them. And actually, I'm not very technical, so it took me a while this morning to even get these two pictures up there. So here we are. This is the way it used to be. And of course, Denise told you all about it this morning. So if you could change slides, please. So just an outline of what I thought I'd talk about, tell you a little bit about the Friends of Grand River. That's how we started. A group of concerned citizens got together. Then we became associated with the Waterkeeper Alliance in 2005. We incorporated federally, and our connection through Cabot Martin with Stig Bernander and Dr. Bernander came, and we took him up in boat. And a couple of the pictures that Denise showed this morning, we actually got out on those clay deposits in the river. And there's a YouTube video that John Parsons did, and you can watch me standing there going like this with my feet, and within seconds my feet are sinking in up to my ankles in mud. And that's what just came out of the riverbank just below Muskrat Falls. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Northeast Mega Dams Resistance Group, and then I'll talk about our joint review panel and inquiry submissions. I'll talk about the global issues of mega hydro, and then a conclusion about where do we go from here. So this is I'm going to take this off so I can walk back and see this a little bit better. This is a quote I got from online. It's an environmental justice organization of Australia. They said, liberal standing promotes environmental protection and the rule of law. Where community groups or individuals are allowed to enforce public interest environmental protection, the rule of law is strengthened. Review of governmental decision is a fundamental safeguard against government, specifically the exclusive arm of government acting beyond its power, that is to say, unlawfully, or making poor or unaccountable decisions. And if you have time to write down that crazy link there, I'd be happy to provide it if you want to look at it. But this was a group that apparently in Australia, they had standing to be able to request a judicial review of any environmental issues that citizens were able to do this. And the new government of the day was about to destroy that and take it away. And so this organization was granted standing to argue against that. So my statement at the bottom is empowering citizens is a fundamental aspect of democracy. But that empowerment is hard won, as we all know, and many of us in the activist department know, and must involve citizens from a grassroots perspective, including the silent majority, which I said yesterday, we do really have to find a way to reach out to the silent majority. Go ahead. Sure. So just a little bit about the Joint Review Panel and the inquiry submissions, just to let you know that for years we've been saying what we said here today and yesterday. We talked about the effects beyond the mouth of the river, the erosion, the sediment, the nutrients held back behind the dams. We talked about the justification for the project. We said it's not justified in environmental terms. The panel said it's not justified in economic or environmental terms. The alternatives weren't properly studied. The consultation was sorely lacking. We had invited only people to look at the habitat, fish habitat compensation plan, invited only people to look at the methyl mercury plan, not public, just invited guests. We presented on the red wine endangered caribou, which, by the way, according to NALCOR's most recent published document in 2017, there are only 20 animals left in the red wine herd. We haven't found the 2018 one yet, so we're not sure how that is. We talked extensively about the methyl mercury and many, many more issues. And we started looking at this in 1998, back when, you know, Bouchard and Tobin had just finished making their statements and deciding they were going to dam the river. And we said, well, we better get organized, we better learn. And we tried to do that. So go ahead, Carrie. Just really quickly, the North Spur Natural Dam. I'm not going to go through all of those because you just heard what Dr. Bernander said. We worry that the North Spur has not been studied properly. We've said it over and over again. We want them to do what Dr. Bernander says because we believe Dr. Bernander is saying that not because he's being paid, but because he's concerned, because he thinks there's a possibility that that dam could fail. If it fails, then the lower portion of Happy Valley Goose Bay will go underwater, and Denise had a map in her presentation this morning, and Mud Lake will disappear. And Mud Lake's already been flooded with about 6 feet of water. Then there's the S&C Lavalin risk report that came up. Someone mentioned that this morning, and we want to ask, you know, did Ed Martin refuse to accept it? Why did now S&C Lavalin not release it before 2017? What's going on with that? They held on to this report from 2013 to 2017, and then they released it and said, oh, well, Ed, we tried to give it to Ed Martin, but he wouldn't accept it. And now, of course, there's the he said, she said, who gave it to who and who didn't give it to who and whatever. So we still don't have an evacuation plan for Mud Lake. It is impossible to evacuate Mud Lake as far as they're concerned. I had a chat with Craig Chalk in Mud Lake not long before I left, and because I wanted to update and see what was happening. He said, well, they're doing some work. They're flying around and trying to figure out what the height of the water will be in case of a flood. So they're doing, you know, the flood risk thing. And I said, but what about an evacuation plan to get you out of there if the North Spur was to fail, or if either one of the dams was to fail? They have less than 2 hours to move out. And he said, there is no way, Roberta. We can't, nobody can see that there's a way other than they want to put a road in, and we don't want to live like that. We go to bed at night and leave our keys in our snow machines and leave our doors open. We don't want to live any other way. We don't want a road. So that's really, it's a cultural destruction of the community of Mud Lake. So are they expendable for the sake of a Muskrat Falls hydro project? Go ahead. Okay, and then, you know, back to the Harvard study, another question about people being expendable. People who continue to eat country food, will have mercury increases in their body up to 15%, 1,500%, sorry. Even the average person who continues to eat country food on a semi-regular basis can have methylmercury increased up to 400%. Stan Marshall said on the news one time, or I can't remember exactly which media it was in, but he said, I don't know what the problem is. Nobody died from the upper Churchill. Well, it shows an ignorance of Stan Marshall about exactly what methylmercury does do in the body. It's a neurotoxin. We could have children in school not able to learn their ABCs because their mother has been eating fish out of that river ever since it was dammed in the 1960s. He just doesn't understand, and he makes statements like that out in the open. So contaminating the wild food that thousands of Labrador Inuit rely on and exposing hundreds of Inuit to methylmercury levels that exceed Health Canada's guidelines for generations. That's on the Make Muskrat Right website. If you're interested in understanding what all Harvard had to say about the methylmercury, that's the place to find most of the information. Inuit culture, they said, is inextricably connected to the wild food. So are people and their culture expendable for a hydro project? And especially for this hydro project. Go ahead. So on the global issues of large hydro, I wanted to talk a little bit, and I think I skipped that, a little bit about our involvement with the Northeast Megadam group. Last year in January, I believe it was, year before last in January, there was a forum in Goose Bay on Muskrat Falls, and we had some visitors from Antioch University. One of those professors, her name is Alicia Maltz. She checked in with me in May of 2016, 2017. My years are all confused. I think it was 2017. And said, come to Antioch. That was the heading in her email. You have to come to Antioch. And I thought, oh, okay. So they offered some money for me to go down and speak with the professors at Antioch University. And I thought, if I go down to the Northeast, I want to talk to more than just one group of people. And then I'm saying all this just to explain to you how networking really works and how we have to reach out to people whenever we find an ear for some of this, okay? So in between all this, Justin Brake had done some stories about the Labrador Land Protectors and their resistance to the project. And a woman named Meg Sheehan, an environmental lawyer from Boston, reached out to him and said, who can I talk to at Labrador Land Protectors or Grand River Keeper? And he put her in touch with me. And she called and she said, we would like for someone to come to Plymouth Rock, Massachusetts in November for Thanksgiving. And apparently at Plymouth Rock, the Aboriginal people every year for many, many years have had what they call a day of mourning instead of a Thanksgiving, because they don't believe that that's the first Thanksgiving, that people were having Thanksgiving meetings. Aboriginal people were having Thanksgiving long before the pilgrims showed up. So I thought, okay. So I called Meg, and we got Alicia Maltz, and then we had another friend named Pete Antos Ketchum who lives in Vermont, and we picked up the phone and called Pete. And before you know it, we had about $4,000 in the bank, or promised. And I said, okay, so we're going to see how many people we can reach out to. Well, I think it was 5 weeks, 5.5 weeks. Denise, help me if I'm off the mark here. In that 5.5 weeks, with a 1998 what is my truck? Nissan. A 1998 Nissan Frontier. We crisscrossed the Northeast United States, from Vermont to New Hampshire to Connecticut to New York City and Albany and Maine and Massachusetts, and we talked to 15 different groups, and we have 20 groups throughout the Northeast United States who are on side and who have agreed to become the Northeast or the North American Mega Dam Resistance Alliance. And the reason they're involved, and this is really strange, you find your friends in a lot of weird places, because the reason they're involved is because there are, I'll name a few if I can read what I wrote this morning, power lines that are proposed to go down into New Hampshire, through Vermont, through Maine, through the Chippy or the Champlain Hudson Power Express, to bring power from the border of Canada, from Hydro-Quebec, and from the Churchill Falls project, because of course Hydro-Quebec owns all of the power except for a few hundred megawatts from the Churchill Falls project. So at any given time, whatever power is running through those lines could be coming from Labrador. So all of these power lines are proposed to go into these states, and these are, you know, well-intentioned academic people, and they're saying, but that's not renewable energy. That's not the real renewables. And not only that, why would we give all our money to Hydro-Quebec for power to come from 1,000 miles away when we need that money here in our home state to provide jobs, good, clean jobs, and good, real renewables, less damaging than the hydro projects. So we made a good fit. I talked about what the problems were up here, and I mean, everybody's talked about them. There's no need for me to get any deeper into them, but the people down there were like, I don't believe this. I don't believe it. One guy said to me, I always thought hydro was just the be all and end all of renewable energy. And of course, that's the message we got to get out. It's definitely not the be all and end all. There's not a thing that humans do in this world that don't cause some kind of environmental damage. What we got to do is make choices about how damaging we're going to be with our developments and with what the things we do. So globally, then, because of this involvement with the Northeast megadams, and by the way, we meet by phone every 2 weeks on a Tuesday in the afternoon, and if anybody's interested in getting involved with that group, I'd be happy to pass on information, and you're more than welcome to get in on the calls to hear what some of the issues are down there, and we give them an update, and they give us an update. And just about 2 weeks ago, we had an update from the Sierra Club National in the United States, which is like a big issue for us, that they oppose any new hydro projects and mega hydro. So slowly but surely over time, and I mean, when I say over time, I'm talking it's like 1998 till now, right? Over time, but this is now starting to catch on. And what we need is for people to start getting involved in this kind of stuff and get those silent majority folks somehow involved, in even if it's in the smallest way. Get them involved in what's happening. So I just want to show you or mention some things that came out in an article. So one of the projects that's proposed to go into the United States from Quebec is called the oh my, now I'm going to forget the name of it. Anyway, it's coming from Quebec, and it's by the Central Maine Energy Department is putting out a call for anyone that wants to have comments on the environmental impacts of this power line. The power line would come from the border of Canada down through Maine to go through to Massachusetts, to go into that area where we had our meeting with the Aboriginals in Plymouth Rock. The power, I guess there's I think there's a nuclear plant that they're trying to close down or are going to close down. And so this power will go through Maine and destroy all of that areas of beautiful, pristine wilderness that Mainers are so proud of, and go in, and not 1 kilowatt will go into anyone's home in Maine or any business. It's going all to Massachusetts. So this one fellow, I can't pronounce his last name. His name is Stephen M. Kasprzak, Kasperzak. He wrote into the commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection and the Maine Board of Environmental Protection, and he's talking about this particular line going through his land. And I'm just going to go over a few of the things. There's a paper that I did get a copy of called Recent Trends and Variability in River Discharges Across Northern Canada, and it's by someone named Derry et al. Now, this fellow Derry apparently is a well-known scientist, because I picked up the phone and called Joel Heath. And I don't know if any of you know Dr. Joel Heath. He's right here in St. John's. His claim to fame in my book is People of a Feather. He's working up in the Belcher Islands, and his science, the work that he's done over the last 8 or 9 years, is talking about how the hydro projects in the James Bay area, they are releasing fresh water during the winter, when normally it would be released during the summer, and it's affecting the ice conditions for the eider ducks. The eider ducks are freezing. They don't have open water anymore, because fresh water, of course, freezes faster than salt water. I invite you to go online to the Arctic Eider Society, and there are a few trailers for that documentary. And I tell you, if you think Denise made you cry this morning, you're in for another tear or two, because that documentary will make you think twice about what hydro is doing. So I went to New York actually with Joel on the 2 weeks that his documentary was shown in New York City. And we talked about it a few times, and he said, you know, there's something else going on up there, and it's affecting the Labrador Current, but I just don't have time to get into that right now, because I'm doing so much work here and there with this eider duck thing. And that stuck in my mind, of course, you know, thinking about anything that had to do with Labrador. And the Labrador Current actually affects our, not just our climate, it affects the climate of Greenland and Newfoundland and all down the coast. So he did not get into that, but he did say he is looking into it. Now, this particular document that I have here from this Dr. or Stephen Kasperzak, that awakened the idea in me about the Labrador Current and what Joel Heath had said 2 or 3 years ago. So he said, in the ocean waters of Newfoundland, Labrador, and Maine, the fisheries are being starved to death. I'm just picking little pieces out of this. I'm happy to pass it on to anybody that wants it. The proliferation of large reservoir hydroelectric dams by Hydro-Quebec over the last 50 years never would have been allowed in Maine for the following reasons. And then he goes into all of the main environmental reasons. He says, I have listed below the observations which support each of the claims made above, and it would be the height of hypocrisy for Maine DEP to issue a permit for this corridor or transmission line and reward the bad behavior of Hydro-Quebec. This is the part that really got me. Half of the Gulf of Maine's ecosystem lies in Canada, where much of the water feeding the Gulf and affecting its temperature comes from, was written by Colin Woodward. It comes from Canada, of course. Climate of Fear, marine researchers are muzzled in Canada. That's another document he related. If Quebec's reservoir hydroelectric facilities are so good for the Gulf of Maine's ecosystems, why are Canadian researchers being muzzled? It is time to recognize that Quebec Hydro's reservoir hydroelectric facilities are a key regional driver in the unprecedented decline in the Gulf of Maine's fisheries. as well as contributing to the warming of the Gulf waters. Then he goes on to say, Quebec Hydro's reservoir facilities have eliminated the spring freshet on these rivers by capturing and storing the spring runoff, which is exactly what Joel Heath said. In other words, holding back clean water laden with dissolved oxygen was polluting downstream water, which did not have enough dissolved oxygen to support the river's fisheries and aquatic life. Quebec Hydro's reduction of spring and summer outflows is polluting Hudson Bay, the Labrador Sea, and the Gulf of Maine by depriving the silica-encased diatom phytoplankton population of its much-needed dissolved silica during its growing season. The Gulf of Maine's cod catch was only 79,000 pounds in 2017, compared to 21 million pounds in 1991. Conservationists, fishermen, and the government are all concerned about a huge decline of up to 70% in the capelin population off the coasts of Newfoundland and Labrador. Diatoms are responsible for an estimated 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide transference from the atmosphere to the ocean. The countries who are the biggest producers of hydroelectricity are warming their nearby oceans. The Gulf of Maine and the South China Sea are two areas in the global ocean which are warming the fastest, and they are located next to the two largest producers of hydroelectricity in the world. The number one is China, and the number two is us, Canada. Okay, sorry. So I just want to make sure there's not something really, really important I have to get to. And then I'll finish up. Okay, so just in the end, in their conclusion, they say, the proliferation of reservoir hydroelectric facilities in Quebec's major rivers has greatly altered the seasonal timing of silica-laden freshwater qualities delivered to the Hudson Bay, Labrador Sea, and eventually to the Gulf of Maine. The diatom plankton ecosystems have not evolved to be starved of nutrients in the spring and summer, and then fed nutrients under lower light and temperature conditions in late fall. As a result, diatom population is adversely affected, and the rest of the food chain. And I don't remember who quoted it or who said it, but someone said it's kind of like watering your garden in the dead of winter. So that is the area that I think that we need to move on to, is to look at, besides the fact that, as I said this morning, that you know, the construction company is up there right now resurfacing the road or the airstrip for Gull Island. So if people want to get involved, now is the time to get involved about Gull Island. They already have the environmental assessment. That's done. They'll call that finished. It was part of the Lower Churchill project. So they have a go-ahead on the environmental assessment process. So let's get involved now. Thank you so much.